Hello and welcome to the Jesus-Centered Family Podcast, where we talk about ministry, parenting, and equipping every generation to intentionally live a Jesus-centered life. We have the usual suspects around the podcast studio today. How are you guys doing?
Good. Really good.
Good. Dane, have you had your coffee today?
I don't drink coffee on a regular basis, just once in a great while.
So, no.
No, I have not.
Okay. That was a question that came up earlier.
But I'm ready and raring to go.
Yes, you are.
I don't need no coffee.
You don't. Absolutely not. Troy, what's new?
Not a whole lot.
Yeah?
Yeah, just living life, keeping busy.
Just living the dream.
Living the dream, man. Loving it. So good.
Good.
Yeah.
I feel like we're out of like small talk content because we've recorded multiple times. This is, for Stacy and I, the third time in a week that we've recorded. So It's been a lot, but it's good.
Yeah. Hey, it's going to be 61 degrees today.
Hello.
I mean, that's something to talk about. February 26th. What in the world?
Yep. And
the groundhog might have been right.
He might have been. But we were talking about we feed our leaders every Wednesday night before youth group. And Tina and I were talking about our meal for Wednesday night. And we decided to go chili because it's going to be a high of 44 and rainy on Wednesday. So just squash that fun little spring vibe we got going.
Enjoy it while you can, though.
Exactly. Whatting our appetite.
Yeah. And maybe some good storms tomorrow. Well, whenever you're listening to this, maybe there won't be storms, but
we're not giving the forecast.
Maybe just as accurate. 50-50 chance.
Yes, exactly.
This is Indiana.
All right, so this episode is dedicated to parenting. So we are in week 2 of our marriage and parenting. I think Stu called it a mini series in service, which makes me think of television. So we are talking all about parenting today. We are all parents, a lot of children between the 4 of us. So I want to go around and just tell me how many kids, approximate ages, and genders. Stacy, we'll start with you.
I have 5 children, 24, 21 or 22. His birthday's next week. 18, 15, and 13. 4 boys, 1 girl.
Great.
Nice. I've got 4 kids. I've got a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and 2 2-year-olds.
Double trouble.
3 girls and a boy. My boy's my oldest.
Nice.
Yep.
I have 4 also. I have 3 boys and a baby girl, 11, 9, 7, and 2.
And I have 2, 21 and 18. Oldest is a girl. Youngest is a boy.
Great. So I would say, kind of like last week with marriage, we have a lot of marriage experience between the 4 of us. We have a lot of parenting experience. As you've heard, we have, you guys both have adult children. You're still in like the middle school phase also. And then we both are like preteen down to toddlers. Not really babies anymore. Like talking and...
I feel like this, I don't know if this is on topic or whatever, but kind of. Anyways, I feel like your daughter, Brighton, I don't know. Anyways, she looks so much older than my kids, my 2-year-olds, but my kids are younger. So, or older. Sorry, mine are
like
older.
A couple months.
Yeah, but your daughter just looks so much older than mine. I don't know if mine just have a lot of baby fat still on them or what, but I think it's the baby. I think it's the baby chunk. But
yeah, Brighton has really long hair too.
That might be part of it.
It's insane how much hair that girl has.
Yeah. But
so,
anyways, yeah, your daughter, and she's, maybe we'll get into it, but she's potty training, right?
We're so pumped.
Yeah.
We've just like this weekend decided we're just going straight underwear, no diapers. Yeah. We still have pull-ups, but we're so close.
That's amazing. Yeah. Man, so good.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. And she's like getting into it now, but she wants like a sucker or a cake pop every time she goes to the bathroom. She's like, sucker? Like, no, not this time. This is what you're supposed to do.
Right.
Good job.
Funny side note about potty training, since we're on the parent, this is a parenting
this
issue.
Is
this is a hard one for parents, right? When talking about this with my grandfather, you know what advice that he gave me?
I want to know.
You probably don't. He goes, here's what you need to do, Dane. Just when they're like 18 months old, just stick them on the toilet and strap them down, and then wait until they go. And then they get the feeling of going in the toilet.
Wow.
And I'm saying, you just strap them on there until they go. And he goes, yep. I don't know if he did that with his own kids, but that seemed a little harsh. I thought, wow, that's old school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the apparatus like? What's the just
Strap,
rope or what?
I think he said a belt. You know?
Okay.
Go to the junkyard and get a seat belt.
I'm like, oh my word. Anyway, it's something you never forget. That's some
No.
good parenting
yeah.
advice there
Right,
for you.
yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, that thought's crossed my mind. Like when they're sitting there and they won't stay, and you're like, no, you have to go right now. I'm positive you need to at least try. Like, nope, not doing it. We do not advocate for strapping your kids. Just let that be stated. That could lead us into the next topic of conversation. What is the funniest parenting moment that you can think of? I kind of put you guys on the spot with this, so if they're just marginally funny, that's okay. Who wants to start? Who's got one? Stacey?
I cannot tell the funniest story. I can't do it. It's just not probably appropriate. But
Hey, we can put the explicit filter on this. You can share
I
whatever
can't.
you want.
I can't tell it. I can't do it. But yes, just yesterday a situation happened, and it's not really even totally parenting. It's more of, it's always involving Justin every time. Like he brings the funny to the family. But our daughter is she's driving. She has her permit. So they went after church yesterday and drove around for like 2 hours. And so I was like, hey, since you guys are out, you want to stop and grab the groceries for the week? And so they stopped, and she sent a message to the whole family
Did
saying,
you do the order pickup?
No, they went in and actually did the shopping. And she sent a message to the whole family saying, I can't stop laughing. Dad just hit his head on the trunk of her car, and he has 2 huge spots. And he said to her, stop laughing or I'm going to start bleeding. And we were like, what do you mean the laughing is going to cause the bleeding? He's like, no, that's not what I meant. But it just makes me giggle because Justin always when he hurts himself, he always gets mad at everybody because it's always funny.
Yeah.
Always funny. And don't laugh at me. It's going to cause
I feel like anytime a dad gets hurt, everybody else thinks it's funny.
It is.
And it's acceptable. If mom gets hurt,
It's not
acceptable.
Agreed.
Yeah.
But yeah, he did not think it was funny. And then when he got home, he had to give us the whole story all over again. And it just made us all start laughing again. Like, we're not super empathetic. We just giggle because.
Well, Justin, I stand with you. Sorry about your head. Okay, good story. Troy, what about you?
I guess recently, and there's been a couple of these situations where our kids, as they're learning to talk, some of the things that they say, they don't mean it to be inappropriate, but it is.
Yes.
And so as a parent, it's kind of funny or hard not to laugh when your kid is saying fork in a way that sounds like other words. And so those are just kind of funny to look back on and think about just how much they don't know what they're saying, but it sounds very inappropriate.
That's funny. And is this with one of your
with
twins?
our twins right now?
And
yes,
so you've got kids that are
and
maybe
they know
old enough to understand,
and they kind of hear what they're saying as well, and they're a little confused. But
That's
it's
so
okay
fun.
for her to say it, but not for them. So
Right. That's
yes,
funny.
yeah.
Dane, what about you?
The only thing that can come to my mind right at this moment is, I don't know if it's a parenting thing or not, but when we were in our house in Auburn, and we were having an issue with our washer and dryer, and so I was going to unhook the washer, and being the not so good dad or handyman or whatever, I wasn't thinking through anything. So what I did was I never turned the water off and just unscrewed the hose from the back of the washer.
Oh,
And
geez.
water, of course, started spraying out at a high rate in our house. It was right in our kitchen. And my kid Angel's not home, and both our kids are. Annalise was probably about 5 or 6. So Will would have been really young. And I'm telling you what, and it just kept coming and coming and coming. It started filling up our tire. And then we have a crawl space, and it started going through this wood for the old, where you put it together. And I am running around, and when it's happening, you can't think straight.
Right.
So Annalise is watching this whole thing, and at some point, I'm slipping on the kitchen floor, trying to figure out what am I going to do. I can't stop this water. Trying to get buckets. I don't even think about turning off the water. I mean, I'm just frantic. And at one point, I looked at Annalise and I went, can you do something? Can you help me? You got to help me. What do I do? Oh, it's just funny. I don't know if she remembers it, but I was so desperate. I was yelling at my 5-year-old to fix this problem that I had.
So, did you end up getting the water shut off?
Well, what I did was I stuck the hose in the washer and shut the lid so it would just fill up and then I went, I got to shut the water off. So I had to go down under the crawl space and shut it off.
Your washer and dryer didn't have a shut off valve right there?
I don't even know. Maybe it did and I couldn't turn it or something. Maybe that's what it was. I tried to turn it and I couldn't turn it. And so I just decided to unscrew it. Not a good moment. Good thing I had it all cleaned up before Angela came home. But oh my word, it was horrible. It was so bad.
That's amazing.
That's good.
That's great.
So we live pretty much across the street from Dollar General, and this past like fall winter we were like in need of something from Dollar General. Like, our boys are probably old enough. Let's send them with the home phone. It's a cell phone. We'll send them to walk across to Dollar General, and I'm like giving them the list. It's like 3 things that we need, and I'm like, do you want me to show you pictures, or you got it? Like, no, we got it. And so we sent them. I have it written down somewhere. I don't remember what exactly it was, but they came back with the wrong Ziploc bags, the wrong size Ziploc bags, which we needed a specific size, so that was wrong. And then there was something else that was messed up, a gallon of milk that one of them dropped. The other one messed up what they needed. The other one dropped the gallon of milk and busted it. And then the one that got the wrong thing also lost the change. It was a $10 bill on their like walk through the yard. I'm like, guys, we literally gave you 3 things to get and you got nothing. And now you lost the money. Like, the whole thing was just a disaster. So that was a good one.
Nice.
All right. What is your proudest parenting moment?
Again, the only thing I can think of, again, that comes to my mind.
I don't have very many proud moments.
Yeah, I'm not very, very proud moment. It was just cool to see how my son Will reacted in this moment. Again, Annalise was probably about 12, so Will would have been 9. And we were taking a walk. It was during the February, I think, back in the woods that we have. And it was snowy, and I thought, let's go back here and just look around, maybe build a fort, with some logs or whatever, just have fun
Hook
time.
up washer and dryer.
That's right. So we get back there, and we're just walking. It's so still out, so quiet. And then all of a sudden, I hear a gunshot. And it just reverberated amongst the trees. And I'm like, oh, my word. Someone's deer hunting or something. I have no idea. I'm looking around. I don't see anything. And immediately Annalise crouches down underneath like this this big log and it starts crying like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Will, I think, was looking at me. He ran over and crouched next to Annalise, and then he got up, and I yelled something like, hey, there's people out here, trying to get attention to somebody. And Will, he runs out from his spot and goes, yeah, and you just made my sister cry. And it was just the cutest thing of how protected he was.
He was ready for a
moment.
fight.
Oh, he was. After he said it, he ran back over and knelt next to him down. But ended up being my uncle, who was rabbit hunting. And again, we were already out there, so I didn't see his truck, and he didn't know we were out there. So we have a little system now for all that. But yeah, that was a freakish moment. But to see Will just step up in that moment to try to protect was pretty cool.
That is cool. What about you guys?
One of the things that my family does quite a bit is go fishing. And so we do that pretty consistently every summer. We go up to Michigan and do some fishing. And this was just one of those, it's kind of a small, proud moment, but also a fun just memory that I'll remember with my son. We went out on a kayak together and just being with him. And he was using a lure, and it's one of the first times he's used especially a bigger lure. He's used bobbers and small little lures before, but to go out and use a bigger lure, and he was casting it and reeling it in, and he ended up catching a pretty big bass, or a couple of them that day. But just being a part of that first catch was just kind of a proud moment for me, and nothing like too amazing character-wise or whatever, but just a proud moment of seeing your son catch his first fish.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
good.
Yep.
That's sweet. For me, when I had our 5th child, I had a spinal fluid leak from my epidural, and was petrified to have anybody touch me to correct it. So I just said, I'll go home and wait for it to correct itself. And they were like, oh, it'll take 5 to 7 days. And you have like the worst headache known to man. It's horrible. And after like the 4th or 5th day, I just like to get up to go to the bathroom. Like you really had to talk yourself into getting up because the headache was just unbearable. And our Camden at the time would have been about 5, and every morning he would get up, Mommy, how do you feel today? And I still don't feel good. And he would say to Justin and the kids, we need to pray for Mommy again. And so he would like lead this little prayer over me, and he's always been sensitive like that. But I remember thinking as a 5-year-old, like, he's the one making the decision to check in on me each day and then to pray for me. So that was one of those moments. And it was something I actually talked about with Justin just last night again. Do you remember when Camden did this? So I would say that's been one of my proudest moments of something we did not initiate with him, but that he did it.
That's cool. Mine would be, we've had a couple situations with like neighborhood kids or kids at school, and one of my kids has come home and said, hey, like I led so-and-so to Jesus today. And we're like, what? So now the joke is kind of like, are you bullying these kids? Like, you will do this. Or, but one time it was one of them, it was in the backyard, and 2 of my sons actually participated in it. We don't get a ton of details from these stories, but I think the oldest one kind of led it, and then the middle boy just kind of got to be a part of it, and it was cool. Like hearing them talk about like doing that together and leading one of their friends to Jesus was pretty fun. So
it's a pretty powerful brotherhood right there.
Yeah, I'm excited.
That's awesome.
Hopefully they keep it up and don't cause too many shenanigans.
I'm sure there'll be those too.
All right, so the sermon from this past weekend was all about parenting. The bottom line, the main point of it is children are a gift entrusted by God. So just like we did with the last episode, if you had 30 seconds to sum up what you think that means, what would you say? Dane, start us off.
Well, I think Stu got it straight from Scripture. There's a verse that talks about how children are a gift that He entrusts to us, and so I think it's at times during parenthood season or whatever, you may forget that they really are a gift, and just reminding ourselves of that I think is very important, and it's a big responsibility. I think that's something our culture does not recognize as much, and that we have to take it very seriously when we want to become a parent and the whole parenting process, and just remembering that God gives us our children as a gift, and how precious that is, and to take it serious.
That's good. Do you guys have anything you would change or add? No?
I think you hit the nail on the head. And I would say our 5th child was not a child we had anticipated having. And he's also the child that has tested our limits. But I have learned so much from him because of his challenging personality.
That was a very politically correct way to say all of that. Good job.
But he truly, because of that, I do experience that gift concept with him in a different way than I have with my other kids, because it does challenge me in a lot of ways. So I do agree with what Dane said. It is a constant reminder of the gift that he's been, even in the challenge that I did not anticipate. And I think that's true about a gift. There are some gifts you anticipate. Like when it's your birthday, you're like, oh, I'm getting a gift. You know that. And Cohen was a completely surprise gift, and surprises me lots of days. But it is a good reminder that God knows the perfect gift that we need, and in different phases of life and different ways that it happens. And
I can relate to that because our youngest is a girl that we found out with all of the boys what the gender was, but this one we did not. We had no idea up until the moment that she was born. And so that was a huge surprise that it was a girl. We only had boys, and she is by probably a long shot our most difficult child, other than the fact that potty training is going well. But she has a lot of personality, a lot of attitude. So I can relate to the challenges of in a different way. Especially our 3rd is probably our easiest and our quietest, and so it's just been interesting, like that transition. So, Troy, what would you add to that, if anything?
A couple of things. Sometimes the surprises are a lot of fun. And so when you end up with 2 babies at the same time, it's been a true blessing. You kind of get scared at first, but it's been so much fun.
2 for the price of 1.
That's right. But Also, just the entrusted part. Just think of just kind of steward what you have been given, and I think we've been trusted with a gift, and how we invest in our kids is just going to be super important. And so, such a blessing to be able to do that.
Yeah. So, Stu in the sermon this past weekend used some pretty high tech technology and was doing some drawings on an iPad, and I was pretty impressed. But one of the things he drew was this like quadrant grid thing. So he talked about high discipline versus low discipline, high love versus low love. I would say if you could assess your own parenting, I have an idea of where all of you are, but where would you kind of put yourself on that quadrant? So
I think you should predict before we say.
ooh, okay. This is fun. I like that. I would say, Dane, I would put you. I think all three of you would be in the high love, high discipline quadrant. So that's. But Dane, I would say you are probably higher on love, lower on discipline.
Yes and no. It's a good question. I don't know how I would think about that in terms of where I'm at. Because if you ask my kids, they might say the opposite.
Really?
I can get a little bit in terms of how things are done at the house and things are put away. All those little things of making sure that we look the house looks organized or things are cleaned up. I find myself doing that, saying a lot of those things. I do sometimes just do it, even though I probably should have said they do it, because I don't want to have to ask them and have to, I don't know.
Fine, I'll do it myself.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I probably would go back and forth on that, depending on what it is.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? I think sometimes I have a higher expectation in a certain area versus something else.
Okay.
So, but in personality, I guess I tend to be less confrontational, more grace giving.
Stacy, I would project that you are probably. Part of this is I'm thinking between you and your spouse. So I'm thinking Justin is probably more of the fun parent, so you have to do more of the disciplining.
Yes.
But you're high love too. So, but I think I would probably put you more towards the high discipline side.
So it's funny you say that because you're very much right. Our children all turned and looked at Justin when this was happening yesterday. But as we have gotten older, I would say in some ways we've crossed paths a little bit. I was definitely a very high discipline, more.
Plus that school teacher in you.
I know.
You gotta
yes.
keep it straight.
And I would say, again, my most challenging child has really taught me that the high love is equally important, and sometimes you have to move on that spectrum. Like you can still be both high and high, but sometimes certain situations requires not that your love is less, but that the discipline takes a little more higher precedence.
Yeah.
Or that you extend a little more grace. The discipline's still there, but the love moves up a little higher. So I would say, like, very much what Dane was kind of saying, like it depends on the situation, but that maybe I'm just old and tired too. I don't know.
That happens with parents.
But I would say that as I've gotten older, that my love level has definitely increased more and my discipline level's probably pulled down. I'm not off that discipline. I can't be because of where my husband functions on that line.
And because of your fifth child.
Exactly. But yes, I very much would agree.
Troy, I would probably put you at the higher discipline, thinking about you and Carly.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably, I don't know. I think I probably fall right in the middle on both of them.
Okay.
I don't know. I think discipline is hard, but yeah, I mean, I guess maybe. I really don't know.
Yeah.
Again, I think there's certain aspects of like each child's a little bit different for me, and I can't explain that necessarily, but I think, and Carly's she can be pretty strict, so I think we're both probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
I think not that we're low love, but I think we're just in a phase where it's like we just got to keep it,
them all alive.
keep it
Well, yeah,
together.
we're just trying to
just trying
stay alive.
Yeah, pretty much. It's kind of, I guess, how it feels a little bit sometimes.
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I would. Well, what do you guys think I would be?
Your high discipline and high love.
Definitely high discipline. I love that graph because one of the best compliments I ever got in student ministry was one of our students who was a middle schooler throughout much of our time in a different place, and then some in high school, and now as an adult and doing ministry. I remember she said, "We never knew if JB was going to kill us or like." But we always knew that he loved us a ton. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's exactly, I think that graph helped explain that. Like, that's what I want to be as a parent. But like, that's kind of as a youth pastor too, like, especially on a mission trip, like you don't want them to think that you're not going to discipline. Yeah. So I don't know. I thought that graph was really, really cool and helped, I think, explain a lot. Like, sometimes it's hard to like verbalize that. Like, how do you want to parent? Well, I want my kids to know that I love the heck out of them no matter what. Yep. But also I want them to know if they misstep, like I'm going to bring the boom. So I don't know. Do you guys have thoughts on the graph?
I think again, like living within that quadrant of high discipline and high love doesn't mean that you have to be 100% at the top of both of those levels, but that you want to remain in that quadrant. And sometimes in some situations, the love factor has to be super high, and you might have to dial back the discipline and experience something with your child that maybe shows a little more love and grace, and the discipline gets dialed back because maybe it's the first time you've hit this, or maybe because there's a trauma situation. Like, as long as you're within that quadrant somewhere, anywhere within that quadrant is a healthy space to be, but being aware that you don't want to flip down into the lows in any of those areas because it is a disservice to your child.
Yeah. Yeah. And he had categorized those too. Like, so the high and high is the faithful father. The low and low was a neglectful parent, which hopefully we're avoiding that always. Yeah. High love, low discipline was what?
Permissive.
Yeah.
Permissive parent, and then high discipline, low love is dictatorship. So kind of categories for all of it, and I think that helps to like explain a little bit more. But
yeah, and Josh McDowell years ago, it kind of goes along with that. If you guys have heard the truth and love concept, if you're high truth but no love, you'll get rebellion from your kids. And if you're high love and no truth, you get resentment. And that kind of couples with that. Interesting. But yeah, I think that's really found to be true. When you see kids in situations that are rebelling, it's usually the love factor is really low, and it's all about the rules, and you're going to follow these rules. And then if it's all about, hey, you can just go do whatever you want. I love you. We're friends as parents. You're my best friend, or I want you to be my friend as I get older. Then there's a little bit of resentment by the kid that you don't really care about me because I can stay out till 1, 2, or 3 in the morning and you don't really care where I'm at. So there's a little bit of that factor.
Yeah. Do you guys think especially as parents who have raised kids to adulthood, is there a way to shift into that high and high space in the graph if your kids are already we've talked about this a little bit even with social media. Like, if you've never had rules, can you start then imposing rules? Like, how do you do that as a parent if you've messed up? Either way, try to get back into that high love, high discipline space.
It's going to require some really hard conversations and being willing to apologize to your child that I have let you down by not being more loving or holding you to a level of accountability that I should have because I love you.
Right.
But being honest with them about what you have lacked in your parenting relationship, and then being honest that I need to do a better job, and it's probably going to be uncomfortable for our relationship for a while, and move. You're going to have to then stick to that and prove that you're not going to be, and I'm sure we're getting to this next conversation, that wavy line, that you do stick to that line of I'm this is what the line is, and if and when you cross it, these are the things that are going to take place. And it's hard to do that, but changes can be made. You've got to be committed to do that, and you've got to have a conversation with your kiddo to let them know I've let you down.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything. One of the greatest things that you can do as a parent is to admit when we're wrong.
Yeah.
And I think as parents, we're nervous if we do that. Our kids are gonna take advantage of that or use it against us in the future or whatever. And again, the degree of how we hurt our kids could be all across the board. But being willing just to say, I was wrong, will you please forgive me in a situation like this, what we're talking about, of allowing you to do things maybe that I shouldn't have allowed you to do. And I have hurt you growing up in your teenage years, and I need to do a better job of that. And even say, I'm learning from God now in my relationship with him, how he parents us or how he is our father, and kind of equate that to learning in your faith, and that we're all learning together. And I think I had one kid one time tell me when I was meeting with him,
Not your own child, a
right?
youth kid.
Yeah, when I was a youth kid, when I was a youth pastor, a youth kid, and he said, all I wanted my dad to do was say that he was wrong for what he did, and he never did. Mm-hmm. And he was just longing for that. Mm-hmm. And it drastically affects kids when they don't hear that. And it's an example of how we want them to interact with their brothers and sisters and with other people in their life. So, and it's hard to humble yourself as a parent. But I think it's a huge lesson, not only biblically, but just a life lesson for our kids.
Mm-hmm. I think if you start it when they're young, like I've done that a few times with my kids, and like I've never gotten anything other than like, it's okay, I forgive you. Mm-hmm. And then like we move on, like nothing happened. Mm-hmm. And it's when they get to be teenagers or adults and like the first time you've ever done it, and they're like, yeah, I expected it from you. Like that's what you do. You screw up, that you get more of that kind of a response rather than a forgiving attitude, and a lot of work to do in that then moving forward, which is going to require more of those conversations. All right. It can't just happen one time. Be like, hey, I've screwed up. Things are going to be different. It's, hey, I've screwed up. Things need to be different. Let's work towards it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've had to go to my kids, probably more so with my son, Will, and just say, I didn't handle that situation or that conversation correctly. I got more strong or angry with my tone, and I didn't need to do that. Mm-hmm. So will you please forgive me? Mm-hmm. And again, I think we've got to do that. We've got to continue to do that as parents, and to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit when he convicts us of it.
Mm-hmm. So you kind of alluded to it, Stacy, the straight line versus the squiggly line. So another thing Stu drew yesterday, straight line parenting versus squiggly line, kind of being always consistent in how you discipline. If you always have the line in the same spot, your kids are going to know. Like they're going to understand where that line is, and they're going to know, hey, if I cross this line, I'm going to be punished, and it's going to be consistent every time. Squiggly line, it allows them to, sometimes they get punished for that thing, sometimes they don't. Now, there is a difference in the level of infraction, right? Mm-hmm. Like there can be different punishments, but some of those things are going to need to be consistently the same punishment for the same crime every single time. Troy. Go ahead.
That was quite a little rhyme you said there.
Oh, was it? I don't even know what I said. Thank you, teacher. Troy, you've got toddlers. Mm-hmm. How have you seen this play out in your parenting? You have two toddlers too.
Yes, so two toddlers. And you do have to try to treat them equally. And so a lot of that is just, again, clearly knowing what you think is kind of the expectation. And I think sometimes that can be hard to identify and take the time to realize, okay, what are the behaviors that we expect from our family? How do we talk to each other? How do we interact with each other in this way? Or what's the expectation with cleaning up? And so clearly knowing the expectations can help define that line. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know those, then it makes that, when a situation comes up, you're like, I don't like that. How do you discipline if the kid doesn't know what the expectation is? And so, or it's not fair to discipline if they don't know what the expectation is. And so going into cleanup time, everyone is cleaning up. And if you're not cleaning up, then
You're wrong.
You're gonna be in trouble. Like you're gonna clean up the rest, or like there's gonna be a consequence. And so being able to know those values and know those expectations can be very helpful when it comes to staying on the line as opposed to being wavy, I guess, in this example.
I love what you said about it's unfair to punish them when they didn't really know the expectation, because I think that's where parents get it wrong, myself included, not pointing fingers. Like so often is that our kids, like maybe they know, but like there's some times where I know I've like scolded my kids and I'm like probably didn't set the expectation super well. And there's been times where we had to come back and be like, hey, I'm sorry, I did not explain myself well. Like you're not in trouble for this, but I think making sure that we know, hey, we've established this, like there's a clear line of communication here and that conversation has happened, and now we move forward from there and we can go back and discipline as necessary as you cross that line.
Yeah.
And that can be hard though with 2-year-olds, right? Because they can only explain so much,
Right.
or understand so much. So how? I mean, do you feel like you have to? Because it's been such a long time since I have a 2-year-old. Do you feel like it almost is as you go that you have to say, no, this is unacceptable behavior, or you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. No, the question JB asked about the toddlers was a little bit hard for me to specifically tone in on toddlers because they're at an age where they've been pretty obedient for us, but it is still the kind of learning as you go, like you mentioned, is okay. Right now, the food or eating time is messy, and so keep your food on the plate, or like, and just communicating that as regularly as you can. Otherwise, they're throwing it everywhere, and if you just let that happen, they're going to keep doing that. And so, being able to clearly communicate, we keep our food on our plate, like that's the expectation. And if you don't, then we're going to timeout, or we're having a conversation, or whatever that discipline might be with a toddler. But yeah, there's definitely at a toddler age, it's a little bit more basic and as you go. And some of it we've learned a little bit with our previous kids because we know what we expect from them, and so we can kind of use that with our toddlers.
Yeah, if you're having trouble remembering what it's like, just go bang your head against the wall. And that's kind of the same deal sometimes. Like you're saying the same thing over and over again with the same results.
How did you guys deal with, and maybe you are still dealing with this too, is like you say it once. Is it a hard, like you say, if you do this again, there's going to be this consequence? I mean, is it a one time and that's it? Or do you allow a couple times to remind them? Because have they really understood or comprehended what you're really asking? Does that make sense? Like how do you do that well?
Immediately. Immediate punishment, straight to jail.
Do not pass go, do not collect 200. No, yeah, I don't know. It just came to me wow, like how do I, even as I get older, I forgot.
Yeah.
You know, how do you
I
play
think some
that
of
into
helping
into
them
so
learn it.
It's not as quick as a line.
Right. I think some of helping them learn it is facing the punishment after telling them one time. Now, maybe the punishment's going to get more severe as they get older, or as they break the rule multiple times. But like we've always done a timer on the oven, and the timeout spot is like right in front of the oven or in front of the sink on like the mat. And so we've typically gone by their age. So when Brighton was 1, it was 1 minute. And like that's a long time for a 1-year-old sometimes. But now that she's 2, she's had 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10-minute timeouts, depending on what it is. And like sometimes it's us sitting there with her. Like, so depending on what the crime is, like it's hey, you need to understand this. Like at dinner's a great example. We got rid of the high chair. We were done with it. We hated it. And so we've got like a booster seat on one chair. Then we've also got a bench that 2 of the boys sit on. Well, she always wants to sit on the bench. So like, all right, let's give her some freedom. Let's let her do that. She never sits there. And so we give her a couple warnings. All right, this is your last chance. And then we put her in the booster seat. And then if she still tries to climb out of it, we strap her in the booster seat, not with a belt, not like here. But so I think it's like being quick but like also showing grace in it, but establishing that this is where the line is. And sometimes that comes with discipline, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not corporal punishment immediately, right? It's, hey, this is the line. Like, we are spankers. Like we've spanked the boys a lot more than we've spanked Brett. Like, she rarely gets a spank in. But I would say she's been our most challenging. But sometimes then it's deciding what the best punishment is for that child. Like, there's been a couple times where like I felt like, hey, you've warranted that type of punishment, right? With Brighton. But it kind of builds to that. Does that make sense? Like, I don't feel like it's necessarily a squiggly line, but it's like almost like a curve. Like, we've got to get to that straight line, and they're going to get to an age where, like, the expectations. Like, we've got an 11-year-old who kind of functions like a teenager. Like, he knows the expectations. Like, he's going to feel the wrath if he crosses the line in some of these areas.
Well, and like what you've just described is something later on in the service, Stu talked about like the coaching sessions of life. And that's exactly what you're doing along the way. Like, you are disciplining her in a way of, nope, now this is what's going to happen. Or if the girls were throwing food, like, nope, now you're going to help pick it up or whatever. So you're coaching and disciplining really is kind of married together, where you're continuing to redirect the behavior back to where you're trying to drive the final result. So you don't have to do 12 steps to get to the one step action.
And then your coaching is easier as a teenager, which I've seen, like, with you guys. Like, I've had both of your kids in student ministry in some way, shape, or form, and you've had some too. Like, you can see that, like, it's an easier coaching process when they get to be teenagers, when you do establish that discipline.
I think that squiggly line is totally unfair to kids.
Yes.
It confuses them about what the line of discipline looks like when it squiggles like that. Well, you let me get away with it last time, but now this time you didn't. And really, I feel like if parents need to live on the squiggly line, they might need to evaluate what their discipline line looks like. Because if you're willing to give it waves, that might mean you are maybe being too harsh at times. So then you felt like, oh, I needed to extend grace this time. And that's when the wave starts to be created, that you might need to evaluate what your line of discipline actually is and should be, so that you don't feel like I need to give way more grace this time because I was way too harsh last time, or vice versa.
Yeah.
That's good.
Or the parents aren't on the same page,
Yeah.
and that creates the wavy line.
That's a good one.
That's gonna be
And so I think what Troy, I think when you said that in the beginning here about this question, is sitting down and what is the expectation that we have? Because if you think about it, how we grew up could be far different when it comes to even parenting, how we were parented. And I think that influences how we parent. And so even kind of sifting through what did my parents do, and did I like that, or how do we move forward together as a team and try to stick to that solid line?
And I think it's so important. This kind of meshes between the marriage and the parenting, but like presenting a united front to your kids all the time, no matter what. Like, my 11-year-old got in trouble a couple weeks ago because I knew that they're kind of fighting about what he was wearing. And I wasn't in that conversation, but I walked in. He's like, Dad, what do you think of my outfit? I was like, yeah, it looks good. And then another child said, that's not what Mom told him to wear. And so I was like, oh, you're in big trouble now. Like, I was like, whatever Mom said is what you should be wearing. Like, it's presenting that, like, hey, we are on the same team, and we want to be on your team as much as we possibly can. But like, we've got to be united in that, and not having that, like, well, my squiggly line goes here and hers is going there. Like, we're always consistent. And sometimes that's, hey, I don't know what the punishment is for this. Like, I know you're in the wrong, but we need to discuss it before we hand down any punishment.
That's good.
Any other thoughts there? I didn't mean to kill the conversation.
No, that's good.
I think too, with discipline, and Stu talked about it, is don't do it in anger. Because that's when you're going to say something or do something that you're going to regret, or your child is going to remember for the rest of their life. And it's just so important. It's so hard. You've had a bad day at work, or you're tired, or whatever the case may be. And so your level of patience is running thin. And so you just blow up. And then you say something, and that your child's going to remember it for the rest of their life and how hurtful it was. And you, of course, hopefully you go back and apologize, but like the whole illustration of once you squeeze toothpaste out of a paste tube, you can't get the toothpaste back in. It's just like our words. And I think we're not going to be perfect, but it's very important not to, like Stuart was saying, specific things like you're an idiot, or I've told you 1,000 times, are you ever going to get it right? Very demeaning, or he said breaking their spirit, like exasperating your child to wrath or whatever. I think that's so important. And if you had a parent that did that, because we just default to that. Like my dad was that way or my mom was that way, so it's okay for me to be that way. And looking back, we would never, want our parents to be or treat us or say those things to us. So really being mindful of that, and maybe having, if there is something going on that was done wrong by our children, and I know we wanted to be immediate, but if your immediate is that you're going to blow up, then you need to step away and say, hey, we're going to talk about this in an hour, and we'll talk about what your punishment will be, so that you can actually quiet your spirit down and get a hold of yourself, and then go have a more logical conversation with them about it.
I think it was explained to me one time about if you spank your children, right? Like designate what that's going to look like well ahead of time. Like if that's 2 whacks with, whatever, like I know some people are going to completely disagree with the whole idea of physical, but like if it's 2, then let it be 2. And if your kid isn't responding to that punishment, then it's time to figure out a new way to punish them. It's not like, oh, you had 2, now you're going to have 3 more, and then we're going to try 4 more. Like it's 2, and then figure out what the next step is, and how even like we'll talk about it in an hour, that could be devastating for one of your kids. Like depending on how they operate, like even just giving them an hour to sit with their thoughts about what they did, like that could be punishment enough. And you're like, all right, you've learned your lesson. Like you sat here and cried the whole time because you're terrified. Or whatever. I don't know.
I read a book, I think it was The 5 Habits of a Healthy Household or something along those lines, but it talked a little bit about discipline. And one of the things that I remember from the book is it talked about after you discipline, it's important to have a moment of reconciliation. And so having that time after there's a discipline moment, like communicating somehow in a way that our relationship is still okay. Yeah. Like I still love you. Like there's still, we're just going to move forward and not like this is it, or you've got to have this punishment looming over you for the next 5 days before we can talk again, or whatever that might be. It's like we're good now. Like we've had our conversation, discipline has happened, and have that moment of reconciliation can be really helpful.
That's really good. I think of our like nighttime routine when we go in and pray for our kids, and usually, I don't know about you guys, but bedtime is usually the worst. So bad. Like just always yelling and screaming, and it's awful. But then like we're not gonna not go in and pray for them and give them a hug and tell them that we love them. And so like sometimes that's like even more than that, because like it takes a lot of humility to be like, I'm so frustrated with you right now, but I'm gonna pray for you and your heart and your life, and I'm gonna give you a hug and tell you that I love you. And then it's like, I don't want to do this right now, but I need to. And I think it communicates a lot when we have to do that or choose to do that.
Right. We went to a parenting seminar thing once, and one of the things they talked about was to help eliminate the moment of anger where you do lash out with words or a punishment that exceeds really what was necessary to preset those things. And we've used that. It's called a strike system, and we've used that a lot, especially with our youngest child, because the emotional piece of it you just get so tired of dealing with things over and over again. And so we, instead of getting emotionally engaged in the situation where we're focusing on 2 or 3 behaviors that we're trying to maybe stop, or your dishes may not go in the sink, they have to go in the dishwasher, whatever the situation is, that when those 2 or 3 behaviors that we're trying to correct are brought into the situation, instead of getting emotionally, you're going to do the dishes for the next 5 years, which is excessive. That's the first strike. And the first strike is always that you lose the opportunity to ride your bike for a week. And so instead of getting emotionally engaged, you know what we're working on, and you knew what the expectations are. So instead of me losing my hair over the situation, I'm just going to say, strike 1, buddy. you have another one, and you know, and that maybe that lasts for a week and then it resets after the week or whatever. And that was super helpful because our youngest did drive the emotional for both my husband and I real quickly, because it was constant testing over and over, and sometimes still is. But we definitely had, sometimes coming up with what the currency for your child is can be really tricky, because like Stuart said yesterday, what worked for child A doesn't work for child B. And you're like, man, I thought I had this parenting thing down, and now I feel like I'm clueless again. And that was so true for all 5 of our kids. One of our kids, you just had to say no and he would be in tears. Another one, you could slap his hands or his bottom and he'd just like look at you and smile and be right back at whatever he was doing. And so it's so different. And so finding out what the currency is for each of your kids is super important when it comes to disciplining them.
And as they get older, the hard thing is they'll point that out, like, you're unfair because you did this punishment for so-and-so, but for me, it's more harsh. Yeah. And that's a hard conversation to have with them, because they say they don't understand it. But I mean, I think that's something to think about as parents, that every kid's different. So again, like JB, what you were saying, you got to find what that thing is for the discipline punishment. But then if it is different for each one, then the kids are going to start getting older and they understand, and then they'll start pointing it out. So then as a parent, we have to sit them down and say, well, it doesn't work for you with so-and-so. This is all we had to do. And they immediately, reacted well. And we understood that they understood what we were saying, but it seems like with you that we can't do that. And I think that's a hard concept for a kid, because they're going to say, you're unfair. It's an unfair punishment. So just trying to work through that as parents, it can be very, very difficult at times to try to understand that and help them understand it as well.
So as we close, I want you to give one piece of unsolicited parenting advice. I mean, I'm soliciting it, but for people listening, unsolicited parenting advice. If you could give them one piece of advice, Stacy, we're going to start with you. Oh, you can share too. That's fine.
Okay. One would be, and this has been mentioned around the circle many times already today, but to be on the same page as your spouse. And you will have to figure out how you do that, because there will be times where you'll want to step in, or maybe you have stepped in and been like, no, that's not fair, or that's all you're doing. And so getting on the same page as your spouse will be huge, because when your kids know I cannot push mom because dad is going to be right there, or vice versa. Huge game changer, I think, for both your marriage and your parenting.
Yes, yeah, and like even especially like a situation where one of you might be the disciplinarian, one of you might be the fun parent, like making sure you're on the same page there. All the time. And
it takes practice.
Yeah,
you will mess up, promise. And then the second is you need to have a village when it comes to parenting. Experiencing things where you feel shame because of something your child has done, or you feel lost because you don't know what to do next. You feel like you've exhausted all of the tricks or the tools in your tool belt. You need a village to be praying for you and with you. You need that village to maybe be the person who goes and talks to your kiddo when, kind of like the faith influencers that we talk about. You need to be able to have another couple, 2 other couples. Maybe it's your small group of people who are storming the gates of heaven with you for your kids. People that can give you advice that are 2 steps ahead of you. You need a village of people to get through this thing. Again, both in parenting and in marriage, because it's hard. It is super hard. And there are really good days and there are some really, really hard days that you endure. And so you need to be able to have an Aaron when you're the Moses kind of situation.
Real quick, to piggyback on what you just said, I think I was just talking to somebody about how it was a divorce situation, and the father lives in a different state, a couple of states away. The mom's here with 3 boys, and going to church, not our church, but going to a church in the area, and she is looking for some kind of, and actually the boys, actually said this, they want some male interaction. They're like craving for it. And I think that's where, as a church, the village expands, because we have to create opportunities for parents that are in those situations to come alongside moms, especially when it is a father figure that's absent, the neglectful, however you want to characterize them, that we have to help. We have to step in. And I think just teaming them up with a faith influencer or with a mentor that's willing to do that, I think is so key. That we have as a church have to be willing to step up to do that. I think that's in order to help them. We have to be willing to do that.
Sometimes that can be as simple as dropping them off on a Wednesday night, CLSM, 6:30, 8 o'clock, to the ministry doors.
Yes.
We have a lot of great opportunities for mentorship built into that night.
Yep, that's so true. And I'll just go ahead and I think mine, I've already said it, is you have to be willing to admit when you're wrong.
Yeah.
I think that is it's such a powerful lesson. It's the gospel of forgiveness. You're teaching your kid how to forgive. I think it's just so important to remember that as parents, that we've got to admit when we're wrong and to say, I was wrong. Will you please forgive me for how I handled this or for what I said? Just keep that ready to do that and humble yourself in that way.
Yeah. Troy.
One thing that I think I learned it more on this podcast from Stacy, I think mentioned it, but one thing we've done quite a bit just this year, we made it a goal, was to spend more intentional one-on-one time with our students, or not with our students, but with our kids. Sorry, youth pastor mode came in there for a second. With our kids. And so I took Evan to a Monster Jam a couple weeks ago. Carly went to Disney on Ice a couple days ago. And so just that communicates so much love. And when it comes to this discipline part, just knowing that your student, or again, knowing that your kid, knowing that your kid can have that relationship with you helps the discipline aspect when it comes to, they know that they're loved, they know that they're safe, they know that they have a caring parent that loves them and wants to spend time with them, can help with the discipline aspect of keeping that relationship moving forward. So anyways, just going back to this idea of spending one-on-one time with your kids. If you have multiple kids, communicates a lot of love and can help with the discipline along the way.
Cool. Thanks for listening. I guess we will be looking out for a part 2 from this, maybe part 3, 4, 5. I don't know. We'll see. There's a lot of elements to parenting that we can probably talk about. So thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. Bye.